So what we'll have a look at tonight are two fairly, I suppose, the ubiquitous functions in Excel. They're index and match, and they're quite a popular thing, and they're very, very useful. So we'll have a look at how to use those. We'll have a good look at text formulas, so how you manipulate text, how you find little bits of stuff in text, how you cut it off, change its format and stuff like that, which is also very useful for various little functions. We'll have a quick look at conditional formatting, which is a very handy little thing to use to help to visualize your data. So especially if you're looking at an awful lot of data, like hundreds or thousands of rows of data, it can make it easy to understand, or certainly easier to understand than just if it's very, very plain. And the last thing we'll have a look at is form design tips and tricks. And what we'll do is at the end, hopefully we'll have time. It can be a bit involved at times, so we'll have a look at designing a simple invoice, which if you're contractors out there, it's always a very popular thing. Okay, so first of all, we look at index and match. They're two separate functions, but they very often appear together because they're complementary of each other. So what the match function does is it takes a lookup value, and it looks it up in a one-dimensional lookup array, and it returns the position in the array. Okay, that kind of sounds complicated, but when we put the two together, you'll see where we're going. And the last argument here I have for the function is in red, and there are three choices for this. You either put in -1, a 0, or a 1. I always use 0 for this, and 99.99% of use cases for this, you will use a 0 there. And what it means is that you want an exact match returned only. If you use -1, it will, if it doesn't find an exact match, it will give you the next value lower. If you use +1, it will give you the next value higher. And it can be very, very dangerous because it means sometimes you can return the wrong value or not the value that you expect. So for starting off, until you get really, really good at using this function, always, always, always use a 0 there. Okay, so here's an example of a function now, and we want to say equals match. We want to find this value RTM space 10. So it's a text value, so we must put it in double quotes. And the second part of our function, so our lookup value is RTM10. And the second part is the lookup array, and it's a one-dimensional array. And it's C3 to C20. So I'm going to look up the value C3 to C20. And obviously, I want an exact match back. So C3 to C20 is this array here, RTM10. So it should give us back this value here. And the expected value we will get back there is 3. So even though RTM10 appears on row 5 in the Excel sheet, the reason we get a 3 back is because it's the third position in the array that we're getting back. Okay, we can also use it. So we've looked up a row there, so we want to get a row value back. In the very same way, we could use it for a column value. So we could look up the values in array in this direction, and if we looked up unit description, we would get 1, 2. We would get a 3 for that as well. Okay, so index or match gives us, unfortunately, a bit confusingly, it gives us the index of where we are in the array, whereas the index function gives us back the value of the cell that we find in an array. So for index, the syntax is the lookup array. So in this case, we'll look up all of this array, the row number, so it's the row number we want, and the column number, which is the column number in this direction. So if we were to look up equals index B3 to H20, so B3 to H20 down here, so that's the array that we're looking up, and we're going to look up the row 3 and column 3. So that should give us the first, the second, the third row, which is this one, and we should get the third column, which will be 1, 2, 3. So we get the third column. So where they intersect, the value that that function will return is this cell here. So it would be division 15, 107 1/4 mile post, plus 18 yards to junction. And for anybody who knows that, that's an Irish rail position, and it's the position of Limerick Junction, and everybody knows that it's the coldest place in Ireland. So what we normally do with index and match to make them very useful is we combine them. So like every function in Excel, you can combine them and you can make any part that you want dynamic rather than actually typing in the value that you want. So what we normally do, instead of typing in the row number and the column for index and match, we use match to give us back the row and the column number. So let's flick over and have a look. So in here, we've got what we were looking at there. This is the array that we're going to use. And what we'll do is we'll just do a couple of simple things here, and we'll what we've got here is we've got the latitude and longitude of where these temperature units are installed. They're actually changed slightly, so don't go looking for them. So what we're going to do is we're going to pretend, right, we want to go and look at one of these and we want to get back the latitude and the longitude version, or the longitude values for it to put into our sat nav so that we can drive away on there. So what we'll do is we will use our match function here first. And what I've done here is I've gotten a nice little list in here. So what we'll do is we'll go and see, well, how did we do that? So the first thing to do is go to our name manager, and I have called this titles. So I'm just going to delete that. And I'm going to delete the one called fields, which is the one I'm going to use for the top, so that we can see where we're going on all of this. So I want to get my drop-down list in here. So how we do that is we use that using a thing called data validation. So under data, under the data tab here, and using data validation, what we want to do here is, for this particular one, we'll just start from scratch. So when we go back in, so what we're going to do is we're going to say, right, I want to give all the values as a drop down in the cell here. So how do we do that? First thing to do, we could pick all of these, but it's easier and neater if we go and we give it a name. So if we highlight all of the values that we want to give a named range to, and we click up in the corner here, we're going to call that titles. It doesn't matter what you call it, but we call it titles. So if you go to here, you select titles, it highlights the values for you. So then we go back, we're going to do our data validation on this. So we go back to data validation. We're going to say we want to allow a list, and the source for our list is going to be the range called titles. So when we do that, it brings back all of the values that we expect there. Okay. So over here, what we're going to do is we're just going to split it out to see how each bit of how each component works in our values. So here I'm going to get the row number back for this value. So what I'm going to say in here is match. So we're going to say D24. So D24 is the value we're going to look up. So it's this value here. And we're going to look it up in the range called titles, which is the red one here. And we're going to say obviously exact match for a 0 there. And when we do that, it gives us back 3. So RTM10 in this case is position 3. So we know that match is going to give us back that row. So next one, we're going to do the same thing here. So we're going to just go to data validation, and again this time we're going to say list, and we're going to go, this time it's going to be for the fields, but we didn't give it a name yet, so we'll just go and do that. So we're going to highlight here, we're going to call this fields. Again, you can call it whatever you want, there's no problem with whatever you want to call it. So now once we do that, and we put our, we'll just go to the data validation again, and we're going to go allow a list, and we're going to say our source is equal to fields. Once we do that, we get our drop down in there, and so we get all of the titles that appear across the top here. So we'll just go unit description there. And in our match value here, just to see how it works, sorry, we'll just pick a different one just to make it look a bit different. Longitude. In here for our match value, we're going to look up, again, we're going to look up this value, which is D25. We're going to look it up in our lookup array called fields. And again, fields, we highlighted as this one here. And we're going to say 0 for our exact match only. And that gives us back 7. So if we count that out, longitude, we get 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So this is the position that we're interested in. So when we combine them in index. So what we're going to do for our index is, again, you can see exactly what's happening here. So our array is B3 to H20. So it's B3 to H20. So it's all of this. I can just highlight it again. The row number that we want, we're going to say is, is E24. So we've already put our match function in here, so it's already returning a 3 for us. So we can say, right, rather than putting in match, we can just say, well, I want to look up this value. column number we want. Again, I put the column number in here using match. So I'm just going to say, well, I'm going to refer to that cell. And when we do that, it gives us back our answer. So, oops. So there we go. So when we look at it again, B3 to H20 is the array that we're looking up. E24 is the row that we want. And E25 is the column that we want. So when we do that, if we look up RTM10, so we come down and we find RTM10 is here. And we have said longitude, which comes back as 7. So that's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Minus 7.712 is the longitude for this value. And there we go. That's how we get it to work. So we can also combine it. And it's a little bit more complicated when you combine it. And until you get familiar with what you're doing, it's always a good idea to split your formulas out so you can see each component working on its own. If you don't do that and you make a mistake, it can be very, very difficult to find where the mistake is. So to combine it, if we look at the non-combined one here, we have our index. We're looking up the array first, which is this guy. Then we're looking up the row number, and then we're looking up the column number. So when we look at it here, here's our array, is this guy. And then our row number is match D24. So D24 is RTM10, comma, title 0. So it's looking up in title 0. And that will give us back a 3 in this particular case. And the second part is the column number, and that same function that went in here. It's match D25. So it's D25. We're looking it up in fields, which is this guy here, and 0 obviously for exact match. So that's how we combine our function. So if we didn't want to put these two guys out here on their own, we can combine it all in one function. But again, word of caution, do it the long way first. And when you get good at it, you can do it the shorter way. And again, if you just look at the functions that we've put in here, so match D24 title 0 will be exactly the same as the first part here, which is this guy. And the value that we put in the second part is match D25 field 0, and if we look at here, that will be exactly the same as has gone in there. Okay. So every time we change this, it gives us back a different value, so we can get the latitude as well if we want. So RTM16, which is wherever it is, 12. Here we are. And the latitude 52.374. So there we go. So it's working. Relief all around. So to go back to so just to summarize it, just go back there for a second. So what we're doing with our index is we are looking up the array that we want to look up. We're looking up what row do we want to pick. So which row in the array, and the column, which column we want to do. So that's what we're trying to do all the time. And when we combine it, it makes it a little bit more complicated, but when you get used to it, it's not an issue. So some other useful functions, just while we're looking at this, they're not related to this, but they're just handy and you'll often come across them. Net workdays is a great function. And what it does, especially if you're involved in any kind of, project scheduling or anything like that, and it's a small little project that you're not using Microsoft Project or any of the fancier packages for, but you can work out the number of workdays there are between two particular dates. And the way net workdays works is it excludes Saturdays and Sundays, and you can also enter a calendar with holidays in it. So for example, you could put in that the 17th of March is a holiday, or the May Day, and so on and so forth. So it's a very, very useful function for working out how many working days have you got between two dates. And is another one. And what that does is you put in a list of logical tests here. So a logical test comes back with either a true or false. And if you put a series of logical tests in an AND function like this, it will return true if all of the individual conditions are true. Or very, very similar again, you put in a list of logical tests, but this time it will return true if any of the conditions are met. So if you've got 5 conditions there, one is met, it will return true. With AND, if you have 5 conditions in there, all 5 must be true for it to return a true. And then not is, again, you try it on a logical test and it will basically reverse the value. So if you have true, it'll return false. If you have false, it will return true. We'll go and have a look. So in here for net work days, what I've done here is I've built a little calendar. And in the calendar, I've said where New Year's Day is, St. Patrick's Day, Easter Monday, May Day, June Bank Holiday, August Bank Holiday, Halloween. We can add in whatever dates we want there. There's no issue with adding in whatever many dates you want. They can be company holidays, they can be whatever, doesn't matter. So how do we make it work then? So down here I've put in my network days. And so what we're going to use is we're going to use a start date and we're going to use an end date. And from here then we're going to use our network days formula. So in our network days formula, if we think back, it picks up the start date, the end date, and the list of holidays. So the start date in this case is C31, which is this value here. Our end date is C32, which is this guy here. And the holidays list that we specified for it is C23 to C29, which is the list of holidays here without, it's just the dates. It doesn't pick up the titles for the holidays that you put in. It's just the list of dates. And again, I put that in twice there, so I'm just going to leave it as C3. That. And okay. Oops. All right. Turn around here. So it's the start days, the end days, and the list of holidays. And there we go with 67 days. So just to show, if we take out the 17th of March, so if we put in a date that doesn't appear between the 10th of January and the 15th of April for Paddy's Day, say we make it October, our days go up to 68. So we've got 68 days because we don't have a day's holiday on the 17th of March occurring within the period that we have. So again, it's a very useful function for if you're ever coming across small things for scheduling and stuff like that. It's very, very handy. Another useful little trick is the and ors, and we've done here is just a little table just to check out what we're doing. So this is, if we think of it as coronavirus tests, and I would warn you, I presume we all heard of the mini disaster they had in the UK last month, or maybe 6 weeks ago, when they missed out a whole period of testing where they didn't actually test, or they didn't count the tests that were done. And the reason that happened was they were using Excel to export from one system to another, and they were using Excel 97. And the limit on rows in Excel 97 is 64,000 odd rows. And they had more than 64,000 rows that they were trying to import into their other system. And as a result, they missed a lot of tests. From the Excel certainly that I use, and a lot of from 2007 onwards, they have a lot more rows than that. So there's 1.48 million or 1.048 million rows in that. So it's a lot more. But it's something always to be careful of with Excel. Excel is really, really good for doing analysis, for getting a picture of what's going on. It is not a data repository. It will never replace a database, and it's something just always to be conscious of if you don't want your dirty linen in public. So we've set up a mini little lab here. So we have a target of 500 tests per day. We have a target of 2,300 tests per week and a monthly target of 9,000. So what we want to do is for a gold star, we have to meet the daily, the weekly, and the monthly targets. To be an accredited one, which is a step down from it, I suppose, all we need to do is to meet one of the targets we have here. And we're a failed lab if we don't meet any of the targets. Okay, so what we did was, today we did 501. In the previous week, we did 2,400. And in the previous month, we did 9,001. So from those cases there, we passed there, we passed there, and we passed there. So we should be a gold star, and we've said true that yes, we are. So how did we get that? So what we did was we said and here's our first condition. So it's I24 is greater than H24. So I24 is our actual test greater than H24, which is our daily test. So that's our first condition. And the answer is yes, we passed on that. Our next condition was the weekly test. So it's I25 is greater than H25. So that's the 2,400 has to be greater than the 2,300. And again, we passed on that. And the last test was I26 greater than H26. So that means that the monthly test, the 9001, is greater than the 9000. And we did pass on that. So we would expect to get true because all three of the logical tests passed. And that's what we get. So if we were to change this to, say, 499 or 500, we get a fail here. Because if we go back to our test, I24 is greater than H24 is now false. So suddenly, one of our tests fails. So the answer to the whole lot is false. We still have here for the OR condition, we still have a true. So that means that at least one of the criteria has passed, or one of the tests has passed. So I24 greater than H24 is not the case. I25 greater than H25, yes, that's true. And I26 is greater than H26, yes, that's also true. So if we were to change this to 2200, we should still get a true. But if we change this to 9000, we should get a false. And we can see now that our failed, which isn't a very good test, but all it's doing is it's checking the value of are we accredited or not. And it's simply changing this from a true to a false. It's as simple as that. And obviously for this test, it wouldn't be very good. So another little thing we have here, which we sometimes come across, is if we get data that comes in and it's CSV data like this, so it's separated by a comma. So we can see, if we go back to our values here, it's the base unit, comma, the title, comma, the unit description, comma, the region ID, and so on and so forth. So if we got that data in like this, and it's all separated by a comma, there's a very handy function that comes across under, once again, under the data tab. And it's this guy here called text to columns. And if we click on this, the dialog boxes that we get up are the same as if we want to open a text file. So these are the things that if you select a text file or a CSV to open in Excel, these are the very same dialog boxes that you get. So the first question it asks you, is it delimited or is it fixed width? 99 times out of 100, it will be delimited. And delimited means that there is an end mark for each field. So there's a separator there that tells you when one field ends and when another field starts again. So we're going to say it's delimited. Fixed width means it's always a width of 10 for each of the fields. I very, very rarely come across files like that. 99% of the time, they're delimited. So if we click on delimited, we click on next, it's now asking us, well, what are the delimiters? What am I looking for to tell me where the break is for each field? And we know in this case that it's a comma. So we're going to select comma. And magically, it now turns each field into its own position. As we go along here, it has separated them all out by a comma. And click on next. You can then format your data as it goes. I very rarely use this. I find it's easier to format it afterwards when you get it in. So we'll just leave it as it is there. And when we click on finish, it magically separates out our columns into their constituent parts. So it's a very, very handy thing to come across if you ever have CSV files or data that's coming from somewhere else that's in CSV or text format. So the next thing we're going to get onto are the text and string formulas. So how do we work with text? How do we fiddle around with it? I spent a lot of my time doing stuff like this. It could drive you cracked at times. So these are the main functions that we use for text and string manipulation. So left, mid, right, find and search, length, replace, substitute, and upper, lower, and proper, which is uppercase, lowercase, and propercase, and concatenate. There's a long way of saying an ampersand. If you use the ampersand sign, it does exactly the same thing as concatenate. We'll just have a look at what they all do. So left gives us, starting at the left-hand side of the text, it will give us the number of characters starting on the left that we specify. So in this case, we've got equals left D3, so it's the cell that we're looking at. And we're going to get 7 characters. So when we start at the start, we're going to get THE space QUI is 7 characters. And that's what we get over here. So spaces or letters or numbers or punctuation marks are all counted as characters. So there we get as far as THE space QUI for 7 characters. Right is a mirror image of the left function, I suppose. This time you start at this side of the the string and you work backwards the number of characters that you want. So if we were to say write D3 comma 10, we've got D3 is the cell that we're going to look at here, and we're going to go 10 dogs, or 10 characters backwards. So again, we count 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. So we get E lazy dog is how our write function works. Next one is mid. This is slightly different. Again, it says which piece of text are you going to look at, where do you want to start, and how many characters do you want to return. So in this case, if we go D3 is the one we're going to look at. We're going to start at position 8 and we're going to take 5 characters. So D3 is the text that we're going to look at. We're going to start at position 8. So position 7 got us as far as I in the previous one for the left example. So C is where it starts, is character number 8. And 5 characters gives us CK space BR, which is the answer that we're getting over there. Okay. So just in summary, just of the other couple of functions as well, just so they're all pretty similar. So cell D3, I have this one merged here, but again, the address for the cell is the top leftmost corner, so this is D3 in this case. So left D3 comma 7 gave us the 7 characters from the left. Right D3 comma 10 gave us 10 characters from the right. Mid D3 8 comma 5 gives us, starting at position 8, gives us the next 5 characters. Len D3 gives us the length of, so it counts all of the characters there, and in this case there are 43. Proper D3 will put a capital letter for the first word in each, the first letter in each word. So in this case we would get capital T, capital Q, and so on and so forth. Upper D3 will convert it all to uppercase, so this is the result that we get from there. And lower D3 will convert it all to lowercase, and you can see that the T, capital T, has been changed to a small t in this case. The other two functions that we haven't quite looked at yet, but we're going to dive into them now in a couple of minutes, are search and find. And search and find do exactly the same thing, except search is not case sensitive and find is case sensitive. So search will find a word and not worry whether it's in capitals or small letters or a mix of both. So in this case, if we looked for the word fox in this text here, we would find that the F for fox appears at character position 17. If we did find for fox and we use small fox, we would also get 17. So quick summary. Len of the text, that's length, calculates the length of the text. Trim is another handy one if you've imported files or stuff like that. It gets rid of starting and trailing spaces. So oftentimes you get dirty-ish information when you get it in from somewhere else, and it's nice and handy to be able to get rid of the start and the end of spaces. Upper converts it all to uppercase. Lower converts it all to lowercase. Proper capitalizes the first letter of each word. Find and search will find specific text within another text, but just remember that search is not case sensitive, find is case sensitive. Replace. It will replace a specified number of characters at a specified position in the text. So for the word specified here, if we said replace at position 3, we could change the E there to a K or whatever we want, or a group of text. We'll have a look at it there in a minute. Substitute is slightly different to replace, and as often it's a more friendly function in that you can replace either one or all of the occurrences of a particular set of characters within a string, whereas replace only does it at one particular position. So we'll have a look at that. We had a look at each of our simple functions here. So we had left 7. If we want to change that to 20, it obviously brings back more values for us. So search then is the first one that we really want to look at here. So if we say search, and so what it is, so find text. So what we want to find is fox. Again, it's text, so it must go in double quotes. We want to have a look in cell D3, which is this guy here. And in this particular case, we're not interested in starting anywhere other than the start. If we had an occurrence of fox already, we might want to start from further on from it to find the next occurrence of fox, possibly. But in this case, if you leave it 0, because it's not in bold, it's not required. So you can leave it, it picks up the default value of 0, so it just starts at the start. So that returns 17, so we can count out there, blah, 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 and we will get as far as 17 if anybody has the patience to count. If we use find to do the same thing, again, if we use find and we use fox in small letters, that's exactly how it occurs in the string, so it gives us back the same answer of 17. If, however, I change this to a capital F, it gives us an error because it didn't find the string within the other string. Okay, we can just try that with search. If we put in a capital, it works. So that's not case sensitive. Search, find is case sensitive. So just be careful what you're doing. Sometimes you want to be sensitive to case and sometimes you don't. So then with the other two guys that you might come across are quite useful. They're called replace and substitute. So if I take this particular string here, highlight it. So it says this is some test text and some other stuff and some unrelated stuff. It doesn't really mean anything, but what we want to do is just demonstrate what's happening here. So what we want to do is we're going to replace the word some, and we're going to use the replace function first. And what we're going to do is the old text is D16, so this is the text that we're looking at. We're going to start at position 9. So position 9 is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. So 9 is the S in sum. So we had to tell replace where to start because it doesn't find it. You have to tell it where you want to start. We want to replace 4 characters. So we're going to go from S to 3. 4 gets us to the E. So all of the sum word is going to get replaced by the text that we put here for our new text, which is the. And again, it's text. We must put it in double quotes. So if we click on that, instead of this is some test text, we now have this is the test text and the other stuff remains the same. Substitute, sometimes a little bit more useful. And what this does is a slightly different job. And what this does is, again, we look in D16, so we're looking at the same piece of text here. The old text that we want to find is some. So this time, if you remember with replace, we had to tell it where we wanted to start. But this one, it actually searches for the word some for us. And again, double quotes because it's text. And we want to put in the new text of the. So we're going to say new text is that. Instance number, we'll come back to that in a second. We're just going to leave it blank now. And what it will do is it will default. And it replaces this is some test text and some other stuff and some unrelated stuff. It now says this is the test text and the other stuff and the unrelated stuff. If, however, I went back here and I changed my instance number, so this is the instance number of the piece that you want to replace. So instead of making 3 replacements, I could say that, well, actually, I only want to replace the second time it occurs. So if we put in a 2 there, we now get this is some test text, so it didn't change that one, and the other stuff and some unrelated stuff. So what it did was it took the second instance of some and it replaced it with the text that we wanted, which was that. So that's the difference between replace and substitute, and they're quite handy functions to come across. Now, to do something really useful with this, what we're going to do is we will here first. So we'll just go back a second. So in here, I have downloaded some data from one of my instrumentation systems. And the way it works is it sends a thing called JSON data out to my database. I pick it up and then I parse it and I do my bits and pieces with it. Sometimes when I want to draw a quick chart or something like that, I take the data, I put it into Excel, and I take the piece that I want and I chart that. So what we're going to look at here is, this is the structure of our JSON data. If you don't know what it is, it doesn't really matter. I'll just give you a quick heads up on what it actually is, because you might come across it in other places. So this is the piece of text that we were looking at there. And if you break it out, JSON data is JavaScript object notation. And instrumentation systems, a lot of data transfer systems are starting to use this, and it's getting more and more popular. And it's a very, very convenient way for machines to communicate with each other, to send data, and it doesn't always have to contain all of the pieces. And that's the same thing with the system that I use here. So we've basically got, it's a little bit easier to see what's going on here. We've got 2 pieces of data. So we've got the first piece is the client ID, and the second piece of data is called data, and it contains 19 individual readings in this particular case. The way my system works, sometimes you don't have the weather data if you don't have a weather system connected. Sometimes you don't get the temperature data here if you don't have a wireless temperature sensor connected. But the board temperature, the board humidity, and the board pressure are always sent out. So what we're going to do is we're going to search this string and we're going to find the position of the board temperature. In this case is 10.87, and we're going to do it for 1,000 pieces of data. This is what we're going to look for. Essentially, if you don't understand the JSON bit or whatever, don't worry. It's just a big long string, and we're looking for this piece of data out of it. So how do we do it? So this is the long string as it appears in Excel. It's difficult enough to read, but we know that we're looking for the two words called board temperature, because once we find that, we can jig on a little bit and we can find the position of the 1. What we're going to do then is we're going to find the word board humidity, and we'll jig back a little bit and we'll find the position of the 9. So that's just a smaller representation of the text. I just took out the bit that might be interesting to look at. So the first thing we do is we're going to use search to find the position of the B in board temperature. Okay, so once we've found that, we know for sure that if we count on, because I know this, 20 characters, but you could count it out yourself, is 1, 2, 3, 4, and so on until you get to 20, will bring you as far as this position here, which is the position of the 1. So that's the first position for the text that we want to extract. Then what we've got to do is we've got to search for the position of board humidity. So once we find that, the search function will give us back the position of the B. And then what we're going to do is we're going to shuffle back a little bit, so we know in this case we're going to take 3 off it to get rid of the 2 double quotes and the single and the comma, and that'll bring us back to there. And once we find this position, add on a bit, this position, take off a bit, we can then find the position of our text in here. So let's have a look. So just for clarity, we'll just bring our, actually just while we're here, the insert date here has gone in as a decimal value, and we'll often come across this. What we want to do is format it as a date that you can actually read and is actually useful for you. So the easiest way, I've got 1,000 rows here, so quickly to move up and down along my list, I'm going to press the control key and the down arrow. That'll bring me all the way down to the next free cell, and in this case there are no spaces in my data, so it brings me down to row 1000 or 1001 with a header row, so there's 1,000 pieces of data here. If I go back up to the top, I click control and the up arrow, and it brings me all the way up to the top of the list. What I'm going to do is I'm going to click on here, I'm going to use the control key. This time, instead of just moving up and down, which is just control down and control up, just brings me up and down the list. This time what I'm going to do is I'm going to hold down the shift key, and what that will do for me is it'll select the data as I go. So control shift and the down arrow selects all of my data there. The next thing I'm going to do is I know I want to format this as a date, so if I right click on it, I go down to format cells. I come along here, and this time I'm going to use a custom format. I don't want to use the short date format because I don't think it looks nice. I want to use a better format than that. So I click on custom, and in here I'm going to type in DD, and as you see up at the top in the sample here, it tells me what I'm doing as I go along. So DD for day dash MMM for month, so that's November, it's showing me there, dash YYYY gives me my year 2020, and then a space, and then HH for the hour, colon, and MM for minutes. So that's formatted for me in a much nicer, more readable format. So that's what I'm going to use, and once I click on OK, it nicely formats my data for me. So that's just as an aside before we get to our search in here. So here's our data. This is the bit that we want to find. So the board temperature is there, our 10.9 is there, and our board humidity is there. So just so we can show that we can't just start in the same position all of the time, I've put in my function here. So I said search, I'm going to search for board temperature, and I'm going to search in C2, which is where my data is. Okay, I'm just going to take off the 20 there for a second. And when I do that, it tells me that the position of the B in board temperature, or sorry, wrong one. The B in board temperature is at position 418. So if you had the patience and counted out 418 characters, it would get you to the B there. So it matched board temperature with the two words that are there, and it gives me the start position of where my word is. Okay. So if we just drag that down along, so for this one here, the position is 466, so it has changed because there's different data included in my string up here. And this is often the case, is that's why we have to find the position of the start and find the position of the end. We can't just tell it where it is each time. Okay, so just get rid of that for a second. So 418 is telling me where the start of my board temperature is. So just to see again, when you're dealing with text functions and stuff like this, it is very, very useful to split it out and do it out longhand. And then when we're finished, we can hide up the columns if we want and just display the answer. But for now, it's a very good idea to do it out longhand. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to say, well, I want to see where in my string I am. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to use the mid function to show me what the text is from there on. So when I do that, I'm still looking at my full text here, which is C2. I'm going to start. My start position is E2. So that's where the result of my search is here. So it's 418. And I'm going to just return 50 characters. It doesn't matter what we put in there. I just want to get something that goes after the information that I want to pick up so I can see it. So that gives me board temperature equals 10.9, board humidity, blah, blah, blah. So now the second piece of what we want to do is we want to add on onto my 418 is here, and I want to move all the way down as far as the 1. So I want to get to this position. So the easiest way to do it is you can count if you want, but sometimes you might be counting 50 or 60 characters. The easiest way is to give it a go, see what happens, see where you end up. So if we add 15 onto that, it's now changed my mid function. So I'm now at RE comma, so I haven't gone far enough. If you can see that there. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to add on 20 because I know it's 20. I've done this a few times. So when we added on 20 characters, so we searched for board temperature, it got us to here. We then added on 20 characters, so we get to here. So we've now got the position of our 1. And just to check, we use mid C2, so we're looking in here. E2 is our start position, so it's 438, so it's the 418 plus 20 characters. And we're just returning 50 characters just so that we can see where we are. So that's the first bit. The next bit we need to do is we need to do this very same function, so we need to do the green part here to find the B in board humidity. So again, we use our search function. We're going to look for the words board humidity. We're going to look in C2, which is here again. I'll just take off the 3 there. And when we do that, we get position 445 is the position of my B here. And we know that we've got to go back a bit. So again, I put in here equals mid C2. So this is my string. G2 is the position I want to start in. And 50 characters, I just want to return whatever is after that. I'm not really interested in it. But what that shows me is that I'm at the position of B and I haven't gone back the bit yet. So what I need to do is I need to take 3 off that. So that's what we're going to do. So we'll take 3 off that. Oops. Wrong one. So this is the position, my 445, and I want to take 3 off that. So I'm moving back my 3 characters here. Minus 3. And when we do that, we now are on this position here. So I know that if I subtract this position from this position, I get 4 characters. So I've got 442 minus 438 will give me 4 characters long, which is 1, 2, 3, 4. So when we do that, if we now say mid, and we say C2, so this is our C2, our big string. E2 is the start position, so our start position was our 1. So this is our 1, 438, so we pick up E2 for that. And then the length that we want, so the number of characters that we want is equal to G2 minus E2, so that will give us 4 characters. And I'll explain why I'm putting in the multiply by 1 in a second. So there we have it. That's how we get our 10.9 from our string here. Now, I want to use this as a number. And when we go and we do our conditional formatting afterwards, it needs to be a number or it won't format it properly. So what we're going to do is we're just going to multiply that by 1, which forces it to be a number, which is very, very handy. Now, just move that out of the way. And what we'll do is we will copy all of our formula, which is all of that. So Control C for copy. We're then going to click over in our insert date. I'm going to go Control and the down arrow. So that gets us to the end of our list. Oops. And we're going to copy out as far as I. So Control and the down arrow. So I know this is the end of my list, and I know I'm putting formulas in from E, F, G, H, and I. So I'm holding down my Shift key and using my right arrow. So just Shift and the right arrow brings me to the right, Shift and the left arrow brings me 1 to the left. If I use Control, Shift and the right, it'll bring me to the next blank cell. If I use Control, Shift and left, it brings me to the left, the next blank cell on the left. So in this case, I don't want to use the Control key, I just want to use the Shift key and the arrow keys. So I've highlighted the cells that I want. I've got my stuff copied. So this time I'm going to use Control, Shift and the up arrow. And when I do that, it brings me all the way to the top. And I'm just going to come down one because I don't want to write over the one I have, just in case there's a mistake. And I click on the area, right click, and I'm going to go paste. And there we go. So if I go back to the top using Control and the up arrow. So I'm back up at the top, and we can see now that here are all my temperatures. And if we check any one of these, so we want to check, say this is a slightly funny one looking one. There's only 1 decimal place in that. So if we scoot across and we look in here, and the board temperature is in fact 9.6. So we know that we're right. We'll just check one more, 10.88. Go across, and the board temperature is 10.88, which is good. So we know that we've done a good job there. We checked 2 or 3 values. It's always a good idea to go and check the last one as well, just to be sure. So 13.55 is what we should have got. And our board temperature there is in fact 13.55, which is all good so far. Okay, so back up to the top. So text functions, they're all about practice. You can't practice them enough. And certainly with text functions, don't combine them together until you're sure of what you're getting, because it is very, very easy to make a mistake. What I've done here, just as an example, is I've put the function all together, so I don't need any of these guys. I don't need any of the breakout guys because I've put it in all in one go. So I've said it's mid. C2 is my text. The position I want to start in is search board temperature C2 plus 20. So remember we put that in our cell here. And then I want to, this piece, look at it. So the number of characters is I've got to find board humidity, subtract 3, and then I've got to subtract all of the place we found board temperature plus 20. So you can see it very, very quickly becomes quite complicated, and it's very, very easy to make a mistake, especially when you're counting forwards and counting backwards. Do I include the 1? Do I not include the 1? It's an awful lot easier to do it out in longhand until you get good at this. Okay, so that's what it looks like if you combine them all anyway. So back to our, so we've now found our board temperature. So what we want to do now is we just want to go and use a bit of conditional formatting on it to say what are the green ones, what are the slightly colder ones, and what are the very cold ones. So for conditional formatting, if we just go back for 1 second, conditional formatting is on the Home tab, and you get your choices here. So that's where you find them. So when we're here, you can see that there are a number of different choices for the types of conditional formatting that you can use. You can highlight cells or rows based on their values. You can add gradients, icons based on the values. And you can create more complex rule to highlight a full row. And this is the bit that we're going to do because it's not a straightforward thing to do. Whereas these are all straightforward. You just basically highlight the cells you want. You pick the rule you want to apply, and away you go. If you want to highlight the full row, as I've done here in the screenshot, it's a bit more complicated. So we'll have a go at that. See how we get on. So the first thing we can do is just highlight a few cells there just as an example. And for conditioning formatting, we can say we want to highlight cells that are greater than a certain value. It has given me a choice here. It normally picks up a few of them. We can pick up what color we want to make them. Say we want whatever we want. We can put a red border on it just if we want. And it's quite difficult to see. Shouldn't have chosen that one. Again, if we say that, we'll do yellow fill, whatever. So that tells us that it's anything that's greater than 10.235, it has decided to highlight. We could change that if we want to say 9.7, and you can see how it changes, or 9.5, and there's probably none of them. 12, and you can see how that works. It's a relatively straightforward thing to do. You can also use it. You can pick the top 10, top 10%, bottom 10, and so on and so forth. You can have a play around with those data bars. Or another thing, you can see how the data changes. So what it does is it makes the length of the bar slightly longer based on the value that it picks up in the cell. You can also do color scales, so you can make them different colors, various bits and pieces like that. Icon sets you can use, are they going up or are they going down? So you can pick whichever ones of these you want. So you can see what way your data is going. In general, I don't find them hugely useful. The thing I find an awful lot more useful is when I can highlight the whole of the row to say whether something is up, down, medium, whatever rule I want to set for it. So what we're going to do is we're just going to remove the formats off that. So to get rid of my formats, I'm just going to go clear. And instead of clear all, which would get rid of everything, I'm just going to say clear formats. So it just gets rid of the formats for me off those. So now, what we're going to do this time is we are going to highlight the full row based on the values that we have here. So first thing we've got to do is if we want to highlight the full row, we've got to highlight all of the data that we want to apply the conditional formatting to. So again, all I've done there, just do it again. I start on the cell that I want to start on. I'm going to hold down the control key, the shift key, and the right arrow key. And that brings me across one cell too many in this case. So I'm just going to hold down the shift key and the back arrow by 1. So I've now highlighted the row that I want, and I now want to the columns that I want. So I now I'm going to highlight all of the rows that I want. So I'm going to hold down the control key, the shift key, and the down arrow, and it brings me all the way down to the bottom of the list. Okay. Let's scroll to the top so we can see what we're doing. So now for our conditional formatting, instead of using our highlight cells rules or top or bottom or any of that stuff here, what we're going to click on is manage rules. And once I click on manage rules, I get my rule manager open here, and we're going to apply a new rule. Right. And it gives us a whole choice of formatting rules here. And the one that we're going to use is use a formula to determine which cells to format. So we're going to click on this, and now it asks us here, format the values where this formula is true. So what we're going to do in there is we're going to say equals, and we're going to go for cells that are less than 10 degrees first. And we're going to say the format that we're going to apply to those is going to be, say, dark blue, because they're cold. Put in the most important bit, which is which cell do I want to look at. So which cell do I want to have less than 10? And the value that I want to have less than 10 is this column here, which is I. Now for this one, I've got to say that the column I is fixed and my row is variable. So if you think back to the first training session we had the difference between fixed cell references and relative cell references. So fixed cell references have a $sign in front of them. Variable cell references do not. So if we type in there $I2, which is this particular cell here, so it's fixed in column because I've got a $sign in front of it, and it's a variable for row because it's got a 2 less than 10. And we click on OK. And then apply our rule if we want. So what we've done there is most important. The first thing we did was we highlighted all of the cells that we wanted to highlight, or that we wanted to format. I then have to pick, when I put in my I2, the cell that I want to look at, I must make the column fixed, and I must keep the row variable because I'm applying it to this row and this row and this row and so on, but I'm only ever looking at column I. So most important to make the rule work is it must be a fixed column and a variable row. Okay, so the next thing we're going to do is we're going to add in another rule, and we're going to say once again, same thing, use a formula to determine which cells to format. And we're going to say this time it's equals, same cell again, we're looking at $I2, and we're going to say is less than 12, and this time it's going to be a little bit warmer looking, so it'll be whatever color, doesn't really matter. And we'll apply that. Oops. And it obviously matters which order we do this in. We'll come to that in a minute. So we're going to apply another rule then, and we're going to say use a formula. And we're going to say equals $I2 is greater than or equal to 12. And this time we're going to make them green. And apply. So the order we want to get them in is I want to move that to the end and into the top. And once we apply that, we can see. So what it does here is it applies rules. So it's going to go and check, first of all of the cells that are less than 10. So it does that. Then it comes along and it applies the second rule, and it says all of the cells that are less than 12, and it applies this format to them. So it overwrites anything that it had at 10, which it shouldn't in this case. It shouldn't come across any. And again, these ones are where I2 is greater than or equal to 12, and it should make them green. So the most important thing to remember about this is the way that you put in the formula, and it must be, the column must be fixed. So the column is fixed, so it's just this column we're looking at, and the row is variable. So the row is for this one, this one, this one, and so on and so forth. So that's how we do our conditional formatting. As it said here, you highlight your full area. You fix the reference on the column, so a $sign in front of your column, your relative reference for your cell, so you don't fix your cell. And the rule application order matters, so it matters in which way you apply your rule. And just think about it, you'll have to have a little play around with it sometimes to make it work properly. But it's a good and very, very useful tool for visualizing your data or for explaining it to somebody else, rather than just having the individual cells highlighted, that you get the whole row highlighted. So on to our last topic then, and we'll try and make this as fast as we can. So there are a number of rules that I always use when I'm doing my form design and my printing. The first one is that I always start with a very, very narrow column width. So what I'm doing is I'm making a grid that I'm going to use, because once I start designing my form, I'm not going to change. If I have one particular cell that I want to make wider, I'm not going to make the column wider, because it screws everything up in terms of the layout that you have for everything else. And that's why people very often make a bad job of designing forms, is that they try and vary the column width to make their form look right, and it's a bad thing to do. Always start off with very narrow columns at the start. Start with a print preview, and we'll show you in a second. What it does is it gives you a layout on the screen of where the edges of the page are. Don't ever use fit to one page or anything like that, unless it's for data or something that you're printing out. It's obviously very useful for that, but for forms, it's just not a good idea. As I said, you never adjust the width of your columns once you've started. If you want to make columns wider, you use merge. So you merge your cells across and you use that as your cell rather than making the columns wider. Same thing applies to rows. You don't adjust the height of your rows once you've started. Again, you use merge to make the rows higher if you need to. So that's the golden rules, I suppose, are that you always start with your narrow columns. Once you set the size of your page, you work inside that box. If it's not right before you start, adjust before you start doing anything. Okay? So go back to here. And what we're going to do here, or what I'll attempt to do in the time that we have left, is we're going to make up a simple invoice like that. And you can see as I start off, I've got my columns are very, very narrow. My rows are just a normal height, but I've increased the height of my rows here by making the cells merged. So start off, all we do is grab a few of them. It doesn't matter how many you have. Make them quite small or narrow. It doesn't matter how wide or how narrow you make them. It doesn't matter how many you have, as long as if you're making an A4 form, make sure that you have more than enough columns made the correct width to start off with. So what we're going to do now is we need to see where the edge of our page is. And some people like to use the page break view. I just don't like it. I don't think it works very well. It often adjusts the size of what you want to look at. So as a general rule, I never use the page break views. I always use normal view. So what we're going to do is we're going to guesstimate roughly where our page is. Just put any old character in there. If you don't put a character in, when you go to print preview, it won't show you anything. So put any old character in there. And we then go to File and Print. And we can say that I wasn't far off with my guess as to where the end of the page was. And we can check our settings here. So portrait orientation is right. If we want to go the opposite direction, we can pick landscape and it'll change our form to landscape. In this case, we're just going to use portrait. Paper size. It's always good to use the proper paper size, because when you go to print it, it'll come out the right size. You can adjust the size of your margins. Again, you can put in custom settings if you want. It's best off to either use normal or to use narrow if you want. They're the two that I would recommend in general. Wide, don't ever see a need for custom settings. Sometimes they won't always come out properly on the screen as you want them. So we'll just stick with, or we'll go with narrow for the time being. Most important, the one that often gets us here is this messes up the layout of our form. If we use fit sheet to one page, or fit all columns to one page, or fit all rows to one page. These settings are very useful when you're looking at data. If you've got a lot of columns of data and you need to see them all on one page, obviously use your fit all columns to one page. Same thing with rows. If you've got a lot of rows, you can put them on. But for form design, they're just a no-no. Just don't do it. So when we go back now, we will see that Excel has put in this dotted line along here, all the way down, and a dotted line along the bottom. If I highlight that, that is the workable page that I've got for this form. So first thing we'll do is we'll just copy this guy. Another thing, all I've done for that is I've gone insert and picture, and I pick up the picture that I want from this device. Just browse to it, do whatever you want. When you're putting logos in, if you decide to, I'll just copy that for a second. If you decide to change the column width, you very often, if you pick up this guy as well, you'll change it's not doing it there now, but you'll very often change the aspect ratio on your logo as well, and it'll look crap, and the marketing people will be after you. So what we're going to do is just be careful with that. But we're going to copy this, put them onto our sheet, wherever we want to put them. So happy enough with that. Next thing we're going to do is we're going to just put this header in. So again, this first guy here is we've merged our cells. So what we're going to do is we're going to go to the top corner, the first cell where we want to go. So it's going to type in invoice. It's going to go back to the cell now, and what we're going to do is we're going to merge all of the cells along there. So we're going to make one box out of all of that. So I highlight all the cells that I want to do this with. I go to my home page. I click on merge and center, and there are actually other choices here as well. You've got merge cells, which basically does merge and center, but it just doesn't center it. You've got unmerged cells, which unmerges them again, and you've got merge across, which can be very handy as well. Pick which one you ever want to use, have a play with them, and you'll see what they do. For this case, we just want to use merge and center. So when we click merge and center, it essentially, for the screen, it makes one cell out of this. If we wanted to pick up the value of that, we saw it for the quick brown fox jumps over the lazy dogs. We had D23 or D3 for the cell there. It's the reference in the top left hand corner that gives you back the value of the cell. So now we want to make this a little bit bigger. So we'll make it up to size 16. So we're centered in this direction in the horizontal, but we're not centered in the vertical. So we'd like to do that as well. So if you look at the values we have here, these are the guys that are doing our horizontal centering for us. And these are the guys that do the vertical centering. So what we're going to do is we're just going to put it in the middle. So you can see there that it has slightly moved up our invoice there. Next thing we want to do is we're going to make a brown box, or a gray box there, and we're just going to throw in a few things into it. What I've done is I have merged some of these cells, so we'll just do that. We'll start off, we'll pick it here somewhere. So invoice 2, instead of having it sticking over there, I like to have them right aligned. So what I'll do is I'll pick invoice 2. I will highlight that many cells, let's say merge and center. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to apply that to 4 rows so people can allow 4 rows of stuff to go in. Instead of merge and center this time, we do merge across. If I did merge and center with those, it would make one cell out of all of these. But for merge across, it merges across this way, it then goes a merge across this way. So when I do that, I've still got 4 spaces to put my stuff in. We'll make that bold. What else do we want to say? We want to say from. So we'll go over to the other side and we will say from. Again, I like to right justify it and we'll say and we can put in whatever we want there. A whole lot would be nice, I suppose. And again, we can use merge across for that if we want. So merge across, do the same thing there. Merge across, make this bold. Now take this much of it, we'll highlight the cells that we want. Just make them slightly different color. And now we've got the top piece done. We want to see, are we still on the right track of where we're going? So what we'll do is we'll go back and we'll just do a quick print preview. Does it look like what we want? Yeah, looks fine to me. So the next couple of bits that we need to put in are, say, the purchase order, the vendor number. We'll just copy those across. Basically, all we're doing here is put them in. Oops. Now, interesting one there. We can't do that to a merge cell as the error message I get there. And the reason that that comes up is because I've taken part of a merged cell here and I'm going to try and move it over across and I'm going to try and put a merged cell on top of another merged cell, and that always gives us an error. So if I want to move that across there, simple little trick, I move it out of the way and I move it back to where I want and it works perfectly. Okay, I've obviously picked a different color for that as well, so we'll just go and change that and we'll put it back to the color that it was. We can make these ones white. Back, have a look and see what it looks like. And again, for all intents and purposes, it's fine. We've got a border here, and I had a border on the other one, so we'll put a border in when we're a little bit further down the road. Actually, we'll do it now. So what we'll do is we'll highlight all of the page that we have. So all of our page is going as far as here. Oops, sorry. That's all of our page. And we can go and we can pick up our border from here. And outside border is the particular one we want for this. We could also go and we could pick on, if we go the other way about this and we go format cells and we click border from here, it gives us a picture of the cells that we have here. At the moment we have a single line selected. The color is automatic, we could give it a different color, but we want to stick with black and we want to stick with just the thin line. So what we're going to do is we're going to draw the line at the top, draw the line at the left, draw the line at the bottom, and draw the line at the right. And now when we look at our print preview, we've got our border around the outside. Next thing we'll do is just get rid of that guy. So now, if we go back and we look at here, what we want to do is we want to put in our item stuff in here as well. So what we're going to do is we're going to put in an item number, a unit cost, a quantity, or we'll put in the item number, the unit cost, the VAT rate, the description, the subtotal. We'll forget about the quantity for a second just to show you how we get around this. So first thing we want to do is we want to put in our item number. So what we're going to do is we're going to select the values that we want, merge and center, and we're going to put in item number. The next thing we want is the unit cost, merge and center, unit cost, and we want VAT rate, description, and subtotal. So VAT rate, we'll make that size. VAT rate, description, and subtotal. So for the subtotal, we'll come back this way. Sub. And so we're left with our description at this width. So again, we highlight our cells, click on Merge and Center, and type in description. Again, we'd like to make those bold. We just highlight them all, make them bold. We'd like to have them aligned in the middle. So we click Align in the middle. And we'd like to have a border around all of them. So we click. Simple way to get our border is all borders from here. Back and just confirm, is that what we want it to look like? And yeah, looks pretty good to me. So from there, we've now discovered that we've forgotten to put in our quantity. So the temptation is that we say, ooh, sure, look, we'll make this a bit wider, or we'll do whatever. But believe me, the easiest thing to do is to go back, just unmerge these cells, and put the stuff back in. So item number is 2 is fine. Unit cost, we can make 2 columns width. So what we'll do is we will take all the borders off just to make it a little bit easier to see. So no borders. Item number is fine. We'll leave that at 2. Unit cost, we'll change that to 2 wide. We'll go merge and center for that. VAT rate, we will make it 4 wide. And description, we'll take another one off. So we'll move our description. We'll just type in our description here. Oops. Sorry. And there, and we're going to put in our quantity there. Now, quantity, we want to have 2 wide. Our description, we want to have that wide, and our subtotal, we want to have that wide. So now we can't see unit cost properly, and we can't see item number properly. So if we go back here, it's we've removed our border, so we'll put that back in. But we're just going to change that so that we can make sure that we can see it properly. And the easiest way to do that is to click on wrap text up at the top here, and it automatically puts them on 2 lines for us. And wrap text again does that. Now when we put in our border, everything looks pretty good there. So now what we want to do is we're going to make our rows for each of the items on here. And what we'll do is make our merge cells just to mirror. What we're doing is we're taking in 2 rows in the same way as the header there, just making them exactly the same width as our headers, so we can make our lines when they go down, they'll all match up. And give them a border. And we just copy them down. So if we copy them down, they'll hop down in 2s. We'll leave a little gap at the bottom so that we can put our totals and stuff in there. Now if we go and we have a look, we can see that we've now laid out our invoice nice, and it's a nice clean design. Nothing is overlapping. We know we're not having to use any scaling or anything on the page, so there's nothing going wrong at the moment. If we want to make our description wider or narrower, we go back and we take out a couple of cells, and you can see now if I wanted to add in something, my grid is telling me that this is the increment that I can use for my widths. So if I wanted to make the description 1 unit wider, or I would have to take it off somewhere else. So I could take it off the VAT rate. So the VAT rate at the moment is 4 columns wide. So I could make it 3 columns wide if I wanted it, and I could add one on to the description. What is not a good idea is to go up here and to do that, because suddenly if we go and we do that, we've lost part of our invoice, and that's where most people get caught. Just do an undo on that, so we're back to where we were. So now for our item number, what we're going to do is type in a 1 for our item number. Again, I don't like the fact that it's at the bottom. I want it to be in the middle. So what we'll do is we will format them all as we go to appear at the top of the cell this time. So item number. In here, we're going to say equals, oh, item number, we're okay. Is that what we did here? Yeah, the item number we can just type in, or we can put in as we go. Or we can have it depend on the quantity. So if we don't put in a quantity, we don't want our item number to appear. So if we wanted to do that, we would say equals if our quantity is equal to blank, then put in a blank. Otherwise, put in the cell before us plus 1. So you can see there that if we put in a quantity here, we get our 2 to appear. So this is so for item number 1, we're always going to have an item number 1. Our unit cost we shall format as accountancy. Our VAT rate we can do a lookup on, but just a little bit conscious on time that we're kind of running out here, so I might just leave that out for the minute. Our quantity we want it to be numeric, so what we could do for that is go to data validation, and instead of allowing any value, we only want to allow a decimal in there, because the quantity could be 2.35 if we're doing something like that, or it could be a whole number, but we'll just leave it as a decimal for the time being. We'll put in it. The minimum is 0 and the maximum is whatever it is. So for our subtotal, we want to say that it's going to be equal to our quantity multiplied by our unit cost. So if our unit cost is 12 euros, and again, we can see now that our cell isn't wide enough. So what we're going to have to do is we're going to have to go and take our VAT rate and make it smaller. So it's always a good thing to do this. If it goes wrong, fix it the right way. So we unmerge our cells. We're going to put the VAT rate, just pick him up. There. So instead, we're just going to make the VAT rate into 2 columns. Wrap our text, makes it nice. Pick up our merge and center for that, and just copy it down. And our unit cost, we're going to merge all of those cells. We're going to merge all of those cells, and we're going to copy it down. Just take out the value out of it first. And do it a long way first. So unmerge it first. And drag it down. So now if our unit cost is 12 euros, our VAT rate is 21%. Format that as a percentage. Our quantity is 4, and it's widgets for training. And so our subtotal then is the unit cost multiplied by 4. There's our description, and there's our subtotal. So I think if we copy this guy down, we'll see that if we then put in a quantity here, our item number comes up automatically first. Our unit cost can be 345 or whatever our VAT rate is, again 21%. We can use our format painter to paint down along. Our quantity is 2, and it's other things is what we want, and we want to copy our formula all the way down. Down at the bottom, we want to put in our overall total. So again, we'll do a merge and center on that, and we'll say equals sum of all of those. So if we now go back and we look at our invoice, and our invoice looks pretty good. We can put in extra details and stuff here, but the basic principle that you want to conform to for designing your form is you start off always with a small grid, a very, very small grid. Remember, these are the increments that you can work in, is however wide you decide to make your columns. The same thing for the rows. If you want more granularity on that, make the rows small before you start. Everything that you want to display, then you pick it up using merge cells. Never ever adjust the width of the columns or the height of the rows, because everything will go south once that happens. So basically, that's all I have for tonight. Um, if you have any questions, I'll see if I can attempt to answer some of them. Um, and there you go. Hopefully, you'll join us again in January for the macros as well. Thank you.